You paid off your solar panels. You paid off your batteries. You own your roof, your land, and every piece of equipment on it. And there is still a very real chance that none of it matters, because the people who decide whether you can insure your home or borrow money against it were never thinking about you when they wrote their rules. Picture a homeowner who has done everything right. She researched for months. She saved up. She installed enough solar and battery storage to run her entire house without a single dollar going to the power company. She expects this to be the reward for all that planning. What she doesn't expect is a phone call from her insurance agent or a rejection letter from a mortgage lender telling her that her perfectly functional, fully paid for system is now a problem. This isn't a rare glitch. It's a pattern that shows up again and again once you know where to look. Here's the part almost nobody explains before you get started. Going solar and going off-grid are two very different things in the eyes of the people who insure and finance your home. If you're still connected to the grid and just adding rooftop panels, most standard homeowners insurance will treat those panels as part of your house, the same way it treats your roof or your walls. That's actually the easy case. The real complications begin the moment you try to disconnect completely. Insurance companies aren't primarily worried about your solar panels. They're worried about whether your home meets basic habitability standards, the kind of thing they've always checked for: reliable heat, safe wiring, clean water. One insurance executive put it plainly: solar and geothermal systems are considered safe. A wood stove as your only heat source, or a home with no reliable water source, raises red flags that have nothing to do with your choice to go green and everything to do with how insurers have always assessed risk. So here's the twist. You can do the environmentally responsible thing, the financially smart thing, the self-reliant thing, and still get treated the same way as someone living in a home with no heat and no plumbing. Not because solar is risky, because your insurer's checklist was written for a different kind of house, and it hasn't caught up. There's a real case that shows exactly how messy this gets, and it didn't happen in some obscure corner of the country. It happened in Cape Coral, Florida, and it went all the way to a legal ruling. A woman there had disconnected from the city's water and power. She used solar panels for electricity and collected rainwater for her daily needs. She wasn't living in filth. She wasn't in danger. She had simply replaced one working system with another one that also worked. But a code enforcement officer showed up, declared her home uninhabitable, and gave her notice that she needed to reconnect. The case went in front of a special magistrate, and the ruling that came back was strange enough that even the people enforcing it seemed uncomfortable with it. The magistrate said she was allowed to power her home with solar, as long as the city approved her setup. But she was still required to connect to the city's water system, even though officials admitted, out loud, that she never had to actually use that connection once it was installed. Read that again. She could keep the panels. She could not avoid the pipe. And nobody could really explain why the pipe mattered if she was never going to turn it on. This is the moment where most people assume the problem is technology. Can solar really replace the grid? Can a battery really get you through a cloudy week? Those are fair questions, but they're usually not the ones that get people into real trouble. The trouble usually comes from paperwork written years, sometimes decades, before this technology existed. The rule she violated was part of something called the International Property Maintenance Code, a model code adopted by many cities, written back when the only way to have safe electricity and water was to be hooked up to the city's own systems. When someone builds a working alternative, the code often has no clear way to recognize it. So officials fall back on the only definition they have: the traditional hookup. Once you understand that this obstacle is about paperwork and habitability standards, not really about whether your system works, everything else about the insurance and mortgage side starts to make more sense. Now think about what happens after the code enforcement part is settled. Say you're fully compliant. Say your city has no objection at all. You still have to get your home insured. And eventually, if you ever want to sell it or refinance it, you have to get it appraised and financed. This is where a second, quieter obstacle shows up. If you don't tell your insurance company about a solar installation, you're taking a real risk. In one documented case in Florida, a homeowner installed solar panels without notifying the insurer. When hail damaged several of the panels, the claim was denied. The insurer later canceled the policy entirely, citing what they called a material misrepresentation. Essentially, the homeowner had changed something important about the property without saying so. The manufacturer's warranty and the homeowner's own savings ended up covering what the insurance policy did not. This isn't insurance companies being hostile to solar. It's insurance companies doing what they've always done, expecting to be told about changes to the property and reacting badly when they aren't. But it does mean the burden falls entirely on the homeowner to know what to disclose, and when, and how, in an area of coverage that most people have never had to think about before. Ground-mounted panels complicate things further. A rooftop system is usually treated as part of the house. A ground-mounted system, or a carport covered in panels, often falls under a completely different part of your policy, sometimes with a lower coverage limit, sometimes requiring a separate endorsement you have to specifically ask for. Most homeowners don't know this distinction exists until a storm damages their equipment and they discover, in the middle of a claim, that they weren't covered the way they assumed. And if you're living fully off-grid, using an alternative water source, maybe maybe rainwater collection, insurers may ask you to add water backup coverage or service line coverage, protections that standard policies don't automatically include, because standard policies were built around municipal water and sewer connections. None of this makes off-grid living impossible to insure. Most homeowners can still use a standard policy, sometimes with a few added endorsements. But it does mean the process is not as simple as installing your system and moving on. It requires paperwork, disclosure, and sometimes negotiation, exactly the kind of friction the marketing around solar independence rarely mentions. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated, because insurance is only half the puzzle. The other half is the mortgage. If you already own your home outright, this part may not affect you directly. But if you ever want to buy an off-grid property, build one, or refinance an existing one, you'll run into a problem that has nothing to do with your credit score or your income. It has to do with something called comparables. When a bank lends you money, it wants to know the home is actually worth what you're paying for it. The way appraisers figure that out is by comparing your home to similar homes that recently sold nearby. That works fine in a typical neighborhood. It falls apart when your home has no real neighbors like it. Off-grid homes tend to be in remote areas, and even when they aren't, there simply aren't enough similar properties nearby with alternative power and water systems to build a fair comparison. One mortgage broker with over a decade in the business said it plainly. If a homeowner stops paying on an off-grid property, the bank could end up stuck with a home it can't easily resell, because there isn't a large enough market of buyers looking for that kind of house. He said he had never personally completed a mortgage for a fully off-grid home in 14 years of work. This is why large national banks often reject these applications automatically. Their systems are built to process conventional homes at scale, and an off-grid property doesn't fit the pattern their underwriting software expects. Local credit unions and community banks are usually the better option, because they often keep these loans in-house instead of selling them to the large mortgage institutions that set the industry's standard rules. That flexibility comes at a cost, though. Larger down payments are common, sometimes 20% or more. Higher interest rates are common too, sometimes categorized as special risk loans. And some lenders will only approve the loan if you agree to a specific condition. The appraisal has to account for the cost of running a power line to the property, even if you have absolutely no intention of ever using it. One homeowner ended up financing not just their off-grid home, but an extra $20,000, the estimated cost of connecting to the grid, even though the nearest power line was 3/4 of a mile away, and they never planned to use it. There's something worth sitting with here. A homeowner disconnects from the grid to gain independence and save money. And in order to be approved for financing that independence, they may end up paying for the theoretical cost of staying connected, a connection they will likely never use. The bank isn't being unreasonable by its own logic. It's protecting itself in case things don't go as planned. But it does mean the very system meant to help people finance self-sufficiency sometimes charges them for the version of the house they were trying to avoid. There's one more layer worth understanding, because it shapes why insurers and lenders behave this way in the first place, and it goes beyond any single home. Solar adoption has been growing steadily for years, and in some places, the economics are starting to shift in a way that makes utility companies nervous. Years ago, a well-known energy research report described a future where, in a growing number of places, it becomes cheaper for a home to generate and store its own power than to keep paying a utility company. The report warned this could set off what researchers called a utility death spiral, a cycle where enough customers leave that the remaining customers have to cover more of the fixed costs, which raises their rates, which pushes even more people to leave. It's worth being honest about where that theory stands today. That prediction is now over a decade old, and by some analysis, the dramatic wave of mass grid defection it warned about hasn't fully happened the way it was expected to, partly because leaving the grid completely turned out to be more expensive and more complicated than the early forecasts assumed, and partly because policies changed to slow the trend down. Whether or not the full death spiral arrives, the pressure it describes is real, and it helps explain why the rules around insuring and financing solar and off-grid homes haven't relaxed as quickly as the technology has improved. California gives us a clear, documented example of policy shifting in response to this pressure. For years, homeowners with solar panels could send their unused electricity back to the grid and receive a credit close to the full retail price. Then the rules changed. Under the new system, exported solar power is credited based on what it would have cost the utility to get that same electricity somewhere else, a number that turned out to be roughly 75% lower than before. Someone who calculated their solar payback period under the old rules found themselves looking at a very different number under the new ones, not because their panels stopped working, but because the value assigned to their extra electricity changed almost overnight. None of this means solar or off-grid living stopped making sense. It means the ground underneath these decisions keeps shifting, and most of that shifting has nothing to do with sunlight, batteries, or how well your system performs. It has to do with decisions made in insurance offices, bank underwriting departments, and utility regulatory hearings, far away from anyone's roof. So if you're thinking about reducing your dependence on the grid, the real question isn't only whether the technology works. It clearly can. The real question is whether you understand, ahead of time, how your city defines habitability, how your insurer will treat your specific setup, and how a lender will value a home that doesn't look like the one next door. People do this successfully every year, in plenty of places, without ever running into the problems we've just walked through. The difference between an easy path and a frustrating one usually isn't the size of your battery. It's whether you looked into these rules before you needed them to work in your favor. If you'd like to explore some helpful resources, you'll find them in the description.